intense when Charlie got shot, and Mikey, in less than a second, does something that I find to be quite strange. He puts his phone to his ear.
The internet did not brace itself for this one, because this wasn't a rumor crawling out of a comment section. This was a leak that walked in confidently, dropped its bag on the table, and refused to explain itself. 1 minute Turning Point USA was busy projecting order, discipline, and patriotic polish. The next minute, timelines were whispering the same sentence over and over again. This goes all the way to the top, because when a bombshell leak allegedly ties Erika Kirk to the chief of staff, this stops being internal drama and starts feeling like a Netflix scandal nobody approved. Screenshots started flying. Group chats lit up. And suddenly, the people who usually control the narrative were stuck watching it unravel in real time. This wasn't a clean exposure either. This was messy, confusing, and just believable enough to make everyone nervous. The kind of leak that doesn't scream fake, but also doesn't explain itself. The kind that makes organizations go quiet instead of loud. Silence became the loudest response in the room. And let's be honest, when an organization built on optics starts scrambling behind the scenes, you know something hit a nerve. This made the Kardashians look boring. Because this wasn't reality TV chaos. This was power, politics, and personal connections colliding in public. Once this leak surfaced, there was no scrolling past it. The question wasn't if this was serious. The question was how far it actually goes. The moment the leak surfaced, it did not feel accidental or sloppy. It felt calculated, like someone waited for the exact second the room got quiet before flipping the lights on. One file, one thread, one set of screenshots, and suddenly Turning Point USA was trending for all the wrong reasons. This was not a disagreement over messaging or strategy. This was personal, internal, and dangerously specific. For an organization that thrives on tight optics, discipline, and control, the timing alone was unsettling. TPUSA is known for keeping its house orderly in public, even when things are chaotic behind the scenes. That reputation is part of the brand. So when whispers started suggesting a connection between Erika Kirk and the chief of staff, people leaned in hard. This was not supposed to be visible. The leak itself arrived with just enough detail to feel real, and just enough gaps to feel terrifying. Screenshots that looked familiar, language that sounded internal, context that hinted at closeness without spelling it out. Nothing screamed fake, but nothing explained itself either. That ambiguity made it stick. The internet loves a mystery that feels plausible. What made this hit harder was the background. Everyone already knew, but rarely talked about out loud. Political organizations run on loyalty, hierarchy, and trust. When those lines blur, even the suggestion of impropriety becomes explosive. This was not about policy or ideology. This was about relationships and power dynamics colliding where they should not. Initial reactions were quiet, and that silence spoke volumes. There were no immediate denials, no press releases, no confident statements shutting things down. Instead, people noticed posts disappearing, accounts going private, and timelines going cautious. That kind of behavior does not calm speculation. It feeds it. Internally, the tension was obvious to anyone paying attention. Staffers stopped posting like usual. Influencers tied to the organization shifted topics overnight. Supporters asked questions that did not get answered. The mood felt like someone had pulled the fire alarm and everyone was pretending not to smell smoke. The sarcasm arrived quickly because that is how the internet processes discomfort. Comparisons flew in from every direction. People joked that this felt like a political version of a workplace scandal documentary, minus the reenactments. Others said it made reality TV look tame because this had real stakes and real consequences. Humor softened the blow. But it did not erase the concern. What made the leak feel especially dangerous was how specific the tie was alleged to be. This was not vague gossip about someone high up. The implication pointed directly at the chief of staff role, which sits close to decision-making power. When proximity to power becomes part of a rumor, the entire structure starts to shake. Even unfounded claims can disrupt operations at that level. As screenshots circulated, armchair analysts went to work. People dissected timestamps, phrasing, and tone like they were decoding a cipher. Every "hey and we should talk" became a potential smoking gun. The internet does not need confirmation to build a narrative. It just needs enough material to argue. Supporters of TPUSA rushed to dismiss the situation as manufactured chaos. They argued the leak was timed to distract, discredit, or destabilize. That defense would have landed better if it had come with clarity. Instead, it arrived wrapped in frustration and deflection. When explanations dodge specifics, skepticism grows. At the same time, critics framed a leak as long overdue exposure. They suggested this was not a one-off, but a glimpse into how power actually operates behind curated messaging. For them, the screenshots did not need to prove everything. They only needed to suggest enough to raise questions. Questions are more powerful than accusations. The first wave of media coverage tiptoed around the story. Outlets referenced unverified claims and alleged connections without touching details. That caution signaled awareness of legal and reputational landmines. When journalists hesitate, audiences assume there is more beneath the surface. Restraint reads as risk. What really escalated tension was the lack of a clean counter-narrative. No timeline explaining events. No contextual release clarifying relationships. Just quiet. Quiet invites imagination, and imagination never plays nice. In the absence of facts, the loudest interpretation wins within hours. The leak stopped being about the content and started being about the reaction. People asked why leadership was not addressing it head-on. Others questioned why allied voices went silent at the same time. Patterns emerged whether they were real or not. Perception became reality faster than truth could catch up. The situation also exposed how fragile credibility can be when power and personal ties intersect. Even the suggestion of impropriety can destabilize trust. Donors, supporters, and partners start asking questions privately. Those questions do not trend, but they matter more than tweets. Reputational damage rarely announces itself. Meanwhile, defenders pointed out that leaks are often incomplete by design. Screenshots can be selective. Context can be stripped. Motives can be malicious. All true. But truth does not erase impact. The leak had already done its job by introducing doubt into a system that relies on certainty. As the story spread, the internet split into familiar camps. One side demanded proof before belief. The other side argued that power rarely leaves clean receipts. Both sides felt justified. Neither side slowed down. Momentum replaced moderation. The phrase "ties together" became the flashpoint. People debated what it actually meant. Professional proximity. Personal familiarity. Something more. The lack of definition allowed the rumor to expand without limits. Vagueness is a dangerous accelerant. Behind the scenes, the organization faced an impossible choice. Address it too aggressively and risk amplifying it. Ignore it and let speculation metastasize. Every option carried consequences. Crisis management does not offer perfect answers, only trade-offs. The longer the silence stretched, the heavier the story felt. Silence does not read as neutrality in a scandal. It reads as calculation. And calculation, fair or not, implies something to protect. That implication kept the story alive. By the end of this phase, the damage was not measured in headlines alone. It showed up in tone shifts, cautious language, and strategic quiet. The leak had changed behavior. Behavior change is the real indicator of impact. This was no longer just about what was leaked. It was about what it forced people to reconsider. Power, structures, internal culture. The difference between public messaging and private reality. Those questions do not disappear easily. And that is where this chapter paused. Not because the story was resolved, but because it was coiling. The leak had landed. The reactions had begun. And the next wave promised to be louder, messier, and impossible to contain. Once the leak settled into the bloodstream of the internet, the situation stopped being internal and became theatrical. This was no longer about whether screenshots were real or context was missing. This was about how fast a narrative could mutate once it escaped containment. The story grew teeth, claws, and a fan base within hours. TPUSA didn't just lose control of the narrative, it lost the remote. The first twist came from how fast allies went quiet. Not loud denials, not aggressive counterattacks, just sudden radio silence. That silence was interpreted as strategy by some and panic by others. Either way, it became fuel. When people who normally talk non-stop suddenly stop, the internet assumes they were advised to do so. Advisors only get involved when something feels serious. Then came the reframing. What began as a possible connection started being described as a pattern. Commentators pulled old photos, past appearances, and overlapping timelines into one long speculative thread. Individually, none of it proved anything. Together, it painted a picture just convincing enough to argue over. The internet loves collages more than conclusions. Memes exploded at this stage because discomfort always invites comedy. People compared the situation to a political version of a corporate HR scandal, except with cameras and donors instead of cubicles. Others joked that this felt like a deleted subplot from a prestige drama that accidentally leaked early. Humor kept the story circulating while disguising how seriously people were taking it. Public outrage did not arrive all at once. It arrived in waves. First came skepticism, then curiosity, then frustration. Supporters asked why this was being amplified at all. Critics asked why it was not being addressed directly. Each side accused the other of bad faith. Nobody agreed on facts, but everyone agreed something felt off. The internet's favorite pastime, assigning motive, took center stage. People speculated about who leaked the material and why. Some suggested internal power struggles. Others hinted at personal fallouts, dressed up as whistleblowing. Theories multiplied faster than evidence. Motive debates replaced content analysis entirely at the same time. The alleged tie between Erika Kirk and the chief of staff role gained symbolic weight. This was no longer about two individuals. It became a conversation about boundaries, influence, and proximity to power. The specifics almost stopped mattering. The implication did the heavy lifting. Online critics leaned into wild analogies. Some compared the situation to a house of cards where one breeze exposes everything. Others said it felt like watching a perfectly staged photo suddenly reveal the mess just outside the frame. Hyperbole ruled the discourse because moderation does not trend. Influencers adjacent to politics began weighing in, even when they claimed neutrality. Just asking questions, posts flooded timelines. Those questions were anything but innocent. Each one nudged the narrative further without taking responsibility for where it landed. Plausible deniability became a strategy. The organization's supporters attempted counter-narratives, framing the leak as a coordinated smear. They pointed to timing, language, and amplification patterns as evidence. That argument found traction with some audiences. But without concrete rebuttals, it felt defensive rather than decisive. Defense rarely wins the first round online. As the days passed, the outrage matured. People stopped reacting emotionally and started reacting strategically. Calls for accountability appeared alongside calls for restraint. The conversation split between those who wanted immediate consequences and those who wanted the story buried entirely. Extremes dominated the microphone. Screenshots continued resurfacing with new highlights and annotations. Every repost added interpretation layered on top of interpretation. Context was not just missing, it was being actively replaced. The original leak became unrecognizable beneath the commentary. This is how stories evolve into legends. Mainstream media cautiously dipped back in, noting the online reaction rather than the allegations themselves. Articles focused on the controversy surrounding the leak instead of the leak's contents. That framing shifted attention from truth to impact. Impact is safer to discuss than liability. Internally, the pressure was visible even without confirmation. Changes in messaging tone, delayed events, and adjusted appearances signaled recalibration. Organizations do not adjust schedules for nothing. Even rumors can force real-world decisions. Perception does not wait for proof. Critics took that recalibration as validation. They argued that behavior change confirmed seriousness. Supporters countered that caution does not equal guilt. The argument circled endlessly. Each side used the same evidence to prove opposite conclusions. Facts became mirrors reflecting belief. The meme cycle entered its most aggressive phase. Satirical posts blended truth and fiction so seamlessly that newcomers could not tell the difference. Parody accounts went viral. Serious accusations sat next to jokes in the same feed. The line between commentary and misinformation blurred beyond recognition at this point. The story felt bigger than the people involved. It became a referendum on transparency, power, and credibility. Longtime observers used it as a case study in how organizations manage crises. Newcomers treated it like entertainment. Both audiences stayed engaged. Public outrage began to fatigue, but fatigue did not mean resolution. It meant cynicism. People stopped asking what happened and started asking what would happen next. Anticipation replaced curiosity. Waiting became the new content. Some voices attempted to de-escalate, reminding audiences that leaks are often incomplete and misleading. Those posts were drowned out by louder takes. Caution does not compete well with scandal. Nuance does not go viral. The absence of a definitive response continued to shape the narrative. Each day, without clarity, hardened assumptions. Silence stopped being interpreted as strategy and started being interpreted as avoidance. Fair or not, that shift mattered. As attention peaked, the story reached saturation. Everyone who cared had an opinion. Everyone who didn't was tired of seeing it. The internet prepared to move on, but not before leaving scars. Scars do not fade when hashtags do. This phase ended not with answers, but with exhaustion. Exhaustion is dangerous because it leaves unresolved questions behind. Those questions linger, waiting for the next trigger. The story did not close. It paused, and when a scandal pauses instead of ends, it guarantees one thing. The aftermath will be quieter, heavier, and far more consequential than the noise that came before. When the noise finally began to die down, the real damage became visible. Not the loud damage that trends, but the quiet kind that changes behavior. Outrage fades fast online, but doubt sticks around like a bad smell in an elevator. By the time people stopped arguing about screenshots, something more serious had already happened. Trust had been shaken, and trust does not regenerate on command. Inside and around Turning Point USA, the atmosphere shifted in ways outsiders could still feel. Public messaging became tighter and less spontaneous. Appearances felt more controlled, more scripted, more cautious. Organizations do not suddenly become careful unless something forced them to be. That change alone spoke louder than any statement ever could. For Erika Kirk, the aftermath was not about one leak, but about perception crystallizing. Once a name becomes attached to controversy, detaching it is nearly impossible. Even neutral mentions started carrying subtext. Silence was interpreted as strategy, and speaking risked amplifying the very narrative she might want to escape. Either choice came with consequences. The alleged connection to the chief of staff role carried lasting weight because of what it symbolized. Power and proximity make people nervous, especially in political spaces that preach hierarchy and discipline. Even unproven implications can warp how authority is perceived. When questions form around leadership structures, they do not disappear quietly. Supporters attempted to refocus attention on mission and messaging. They pushed content forward as if momentum could overwrite doubt. That approach works in marketing, but struggles in crises. Audiences notice when tone shifts from confident to defensive. Confidence does not need reminding. Critics, meanwhile, treated the absence of clarity as confirmation enough. They argued that organizations built on transparency should not stumble over simple explanations. The longer answers failed to arrive, the more critics felt vindicated. In scandals, time often sides with suspicion rather than patience. The ripple effects extended beyond individuals into relationships. Allies grew more careful about public association. Appearances became selective. Collaboration felt riskier. In political ecosystems, proximity is currency, and controversy devalues it instantly. Even rumors can cool partnerships. Donors and stakeholders began asking questions privately, not on social media. Those conversations never trend, but they matter more than comment sections. Confidence behind closed doors determines sustainability. Once that confidence wavers, rebuilding it is slow and uncomfortable. The internet, predictably, moved on to the next distraction. New scandals replaced old ones, and outrage found fresh targets. But replacement does not equal erasure. This story remained archived in collective memory, ready to be referenced whenever convenient. The internet never forgets what fits a narrative. What lingered was the discomfort of unresolved questions. No definitive proof emerged to settle debates. No clean denial closed the loop. Ambiguity hardened into assumption. In public life, ambiguity rarely benefits the accused. Media retrospectives began framing the incident as a lesson rather than a breaking story. Language softened, but conclusions stayed implied. The shift from what happened to what it represents marked a turning point. Stories mature when they stop needing updates. For observers, the episode became a case study in modern scandal mechanics. Leaks no longer need full documentation to cause impact. Suggestion plus amplification is often enough. Truth becomes secondary to trajectory. Internally, recalibration continued quietly. Messaging discipline tightened. Risk assessment replaced spontaneity. Decisions were made with the assumption that scrutiny would not disappear. That assumption was correct. The situation also changed how future controversies would be handled. Preemptive caution replaced reactive confidence. Once burned, organizations adapt. Adaptation is survival, but it comes at a cost. Authenticity often gets traded for safety. Public perception settled into something less explosive, but more permanent. Not outrage, not certainty, but suspicion. Suspicion does not demand proof. It only demands repetition. And repetition had already done its work. For many supporters, the frustration came from feeling caught between loyalty and unanswered questions. Defending something without clarity is exhausting. Over time, exhaustion leads to disengagement. Disengagement is quieter than backlash, but more damaging. Critics, on the other hand, stopped pushing and started waiting. Waiting is powerful when you believe time is on your side. Every future misstep, no matter how small, risks being reinterpreted through this lens. Context sticks. The real consequence of the leak was not exposure, but erosion. Erosion of confidence, erosion of certainty, erosion of control. Those losses do not announce themselves. They accumulate slowly and suddenly feel irreversible. This story never reached a dramatic conclusion because modern scandals rarely do. They do not end, they transform. They become background noise that influences decisions long after attention fades. Silence becomes the ending, and that silence is the most dangerous part. Because unresolved stories do not disappear. They wait. They resurface when least convenient. They get reactivated by unrelated moments. Memory is patient. What started as a bombshell leak ended as a permanent question mark. Not loud, not trending, but present. Present in how people talk, hesitate, and calculate. Present in what is not said as much as what is. The lesson here is uncomfortable but clear. Power does not need proof to be shaken. It only needs doubt. Once doubt enters the structure, everything built on certainty feels less stable. And that is the true aftermath. Not the screenshots, not the memes, not the arguments, It is the quiet shift in gravity when people stop assuming things are fine. Because once the illusion cracks even slightly, it never looks the same again. Now don't scroll away acting like this was just another internet rumor that'll vanish by morning. If this leak made you pause, raise an eyebrow, or quietly say, yeah, something's not right, then it already did its job. This wasn't loud chaos for clicks. This was the kind of story that slips into the cracks and stays there. And stories like that never really die. So let's talk in the comments, because that's where the real pressure builds. Do you think this was a calculated hit job, or a truth that leaked before anyone could contain it? Was this about individuals, or about how power protects itself behind closed doors? Say it straight. No safe takes, no fence sitting. The comment section is the only place this conversation doesn't get managed. If this breakdown had you locked in, smash that like button like it owes you money. Hit it the way a leak hits a group chat at 2 a.m. when nobody's ready. That one click tells the algorithm you want deeper dives, messier truths, and stories that don't come with a PR filter. Likes are how these investigations keep breathing. And if you want more bombshells before they get sanitized, make sure you subscribe. Scandals don't send calendar invites. They drop suddenly, spread quietly, and explode when nobody's prepared. This is where we track them from first whisper to lasting fallout, because today's allegation becomes tomorrow's open secret. And silence is never as innocent as it looks. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay watching, because the next leak is always closer than it seems. This is Secret Scoop, where the quiet stories hit the hardest, and nothing powerful stays hidden forever.